Hi, I'm Jim, and today we're diving into one of the crucial elements of logistics in StarCitizen, the cargo elevators. These elevators will be integral to the game's economy and operations, so let's explore how they work and why I think we're going to have a love-hate relationship with them. So, if for somehow you're unaware, the cargo elevators in StarCitizen are a specialized interface that will be used to create a physical entity for cargo or items that you have stored. Like a POI on a planet, a city, a space station, and they'll likely be used in the future at player outposts. They're going to be a pivotal part for the movement of cargo and essential for normal trading and the soon-to-be-had trading missions. And at some point, the maintenance and refitting of our ships and the industry that's coming in the future as well. Cargo elevators, and by extension, cargo loading, will be a huge part of logistics in StarCitizen. And it'll affect everyone inside the game equally, regardless if you're just wanting a calmer life of being a trader or if you're one of the biggest of PvP chads. We're going to have to accept the fact that we're going to be spending likely more time than we otherwise would want to, just loading and moving things from point A to point B. Or in the future, we're going to be paying someone to do it for us and thus incurring that cost to avoid having to load and transport our own items. But I don't imagine that'll be an option for us for some time, as the player-to-player mission system is still quite lackluster, and to be honest, the reputation system is not nearly as far along as it would need to be to start trusting other players with large amounts of inventory of any value. Now, while I'm very much looking forward to the personal hangars, I'm not nearly as excited as about the freight elevators. Though I admit I understand the need for that type of in-game mechanic, I do, like others, worry about turning everything into a waiting simulator or a second job, as we do need to maintain the ability to play StarCitizen casually, and that might become very hard balance for SIG to achieve. I feel like up until this point, SIG has been hyper-focused on our experience inside the cockpit. I mean, let's be honest here, people aren't generally backing the game because they will get to be a space trucker. They generally end up backing the game because, wow, look how cool that ship looks. And then they have an idea of what role they would like to fill in the galaxy and purchase the ship or ships they think will best fit the role and their budget of what they're willing to spend on a video game. But I'm starting to notice a trend with SIG focusing on the game outside of our ships, and I'm fine with that. It's a large game and there's plenty to actually focus on outside of just spaceships. They're going to be giving us more reasons and tasks to step outside of the bridge or cockpit of our favorite vessel and taking the time to engage with other non-flight aspects of the game. And I don't imagine that'll just be limited to freight elevators. I fully expect to see many other aspects of the game come along that force us out of the ships and engage with systems other than a spaceship. I think we're going to see a big part of that come out with the addition of player-owned structures, and it wouldn't surprise me to see them start a bit sooner and on a much smaller scale with adding things inside of our player hangars that we need to interact with or might want to interact with. Now, why do I say we'll have a love-hate relationship with elevators? Well, obviously the first part is it's going to be physically loading our own and likewise unloading our own cargo. We've all become, or at least I certainly have, become quite used to going to location, buying resources, and having it auto-load to our ship for us. Traveling to location B, pressing sell to have it all moved away from our ships. Running cargo is going to be much more cumbersome now, especially if you're going to a place that's not necessarily safe to buy it from to begin with. I could see trade runs easily doubling, if not more, in the amount of time it takes to complete them. They're either going to take much longer for you to complete, or you're going to be spending a lot more time in a group running missions that you used to run solo or trade routes that you used to run solo. But either way, I imagine that the credit per hour efficiency of trade missions, like previous to the new ones we're going to see, are likely to take a big dive once 324 hits. Now, the trade missions, the new ones we're getting, will probably be a decent payout, as SIG has always seemed to incentivize new mission payouts just so people run them so they can get the data on like what's going right with them and what's going wrong with them. So the payout on those will probably be fine as soon as it comes out, and then they'll later get brought back into more of a balance with other missions. But for now, another and honestly much larger problem, in my opinion, is that many ships were designed prior to cargo being physicalized. And while they work, they certainly aren't what I'd consider well suited for the current system we're about to be forced into. Some examples would be something like the C2 will work just fine with physicalized cargo and cargo elevators. Now, while it sure could use some love in the tractor beam department, it is at least functional in terms of cargo transportation. Whereas something like the Caterpillar, while also still functional, has no real way for you to see what you're doing from the ground while loading it, and no way to easily board the ship since the side ramps that were at one point intended to either extend down to the ground or become an elevator, as I've heard, never received that functionality. Even the side-mounted tractor beam is still barely usable and can only really place items on the edge of a platform. You certainly can't see what you're doing without changing the camera mode from either the ground or the tractor beam station, which I'd argue is more of a workaround at best, not an actual solution. However, as I said, it is at least still able to perform its function of transporting cargo. Personally, I'd like to see the tractor beam station stay the way it is on the Cat, but maybe redesign the tractor beams to run on a rail system similar to what we saw with the Ironclad concept. And I'd also love to see the ship get its modularity finally added, as I'm sure a lot of other people would as well, to ships like the Carrack, which will basically just be useless for moving cargo post 324 until the cargo modules on the underbelly can finally be opened separately from the exterior. You will currently only be able to use the Carrack if you opt for the autoload feature, which I have read can take quite a while at the moment, but we'll have to wait till 324 to see how long that is. I'm also not sure and haven't read if that feature is available outside of the hangars, so I don't know if it's able to be used outside of landing at a station or a city. If you weren't aware, the Carrack only currently has one way to get inside to the cargo modules, and it's through two small doors that will not allow you to carry a large SCU container past them. And I also understand that from a developer's perspective, it's important to get the main feature into the game. Then once it's there and stable, you can add features or quality of life updates. And I read that they're adding things currently like a search feature, which we've all been needing and wanting for quite a while, to the elevator terminal in the gear kiosks. But I can't understand why they chose to leave out something as simple as an auto stack function. We used to have it. We used to be able to go into the ragdoll inventory that we currently have, right click and hit auto stack, and it would combine all of the like modules or like things that could be stacked into nice neat little stacks. It was nice not having to scroll through screen after screen after screen of unstacked magazines or med pens. I'd also like to see them go away from the idea of having to buy the empty SCU containers and just put them into items for it. Just spawn it into the world. Just move to a system that once I select from the elevator kiosk, say an assortment of drinks, ammo, guns, etc., whatever have you, just say, hey, you're going to need 4 SCU of space to spawn those items. And ask me how many and what size of boxes would I like it to spawn in. I don't need a cargo deck of 800 individual waters being shipped up to me. Spawn items from the elevator in boxes, unless it's a ship component or something sizable, and I can just get the gear kiosk if I need smaller numbers of unpacked items. Now, speaking on the gear kiosk, while I understand removing access to local inventory at, say, a distribution center, so you can no longer go in and loot 35 bodies, just dragging the dead bodies inventory into the local DC inventory, then getting back onto my ship, pressing move all into the inventory of my ship before leaving, I get that's probably not the intended way to loot items in the game. And I could understand why it's not beneficial or balanced to keep that in game. However, I don't understand removing the current ragdoll system in its entirety, as I think it does have some intended uses in places where it just makes sense to keep. If I'm in my personal hangar, just let me use the ragdoll system as it exists. Let me access whatever I have in the local inventory just from that. And so long as it's not something sizable like a ship weapon or components or obviously resources, don't let me just drag those over into a ship. That makes complete sense. But let me use it for armor and for weapons and for food and consumables and med pens and things like that. There's nothing gained by forcing me to run back to a kiosk because I forgot to grab my helmet or boots or whatever have you. Again, we don't need this everywhere. I get having 800 rounds of spare railgun ammo stored at Repel's local inventory that I can access whenever I want isn't necessarily a balanced way to access an inventory system, but there will be places where just pressing I and grabbing what I need, untethered from a physical kiosk, isn't game or immersion breaking. It's just a better user experience in those areas. Don't make it take an hour to load out my Kiosks armory while it's landed in my personal hangar. Throw us a bone here. Work with me. It seems akin to me the same concept of how most survival crafters make me have crafting components in my personal inventory, when there really isn't any reason I shouldn't just be able to craft something straight from the storage at my base. Sure, if I'm out among the game world, I need it on my person to perform that action, but the lack of ability to perform it in my base, it's just added inconvenience and honestly a worse game experience. There's going to be plenty of places in StarCitizen for grind, and accessing my inventory doesn't always need to be one of them. Also, don't make us buy everything in game. Wouldn't it be nice just to have an included ground vehicle inside our hangars that is purpose built for moving freight from the hangar to our ship? And again, I said from the hangar to our ship, not inside of it. I'm perfectly fine with having specific needs of equipment on my person or vehicles to move stuff from that to inside of my ship. Just make the cargo spawn on a moving platform that we can walk or drive over to the loading area of our ship. The big ships are big, and if you've made the hangars 30% larger like I've read about, I would rather not spend 45 minutes just running back and forth from the spawn location of the boxes to the cargo grid of my ship. Give me something that can move all the boxes closer to my ship. Not into them, just closer. We don't need to embrace the suck on every aspect of the game. So again, while I'm looking forward to having a richer in-game experience, I realize SIG will be creating loops that will force us outside of our ships in the future, from cargo to engineering, ship refitting, and upkeep. It doesn't always need to be a grind though, or I guess more importantly, it doesn't need to feel like an inconvenience. As someone who loves to pirate things, I loved the addition of physicalized inventories, which I think was around 3.18 if I remember right. Even when the initial implementation was just ships exploding into literal loot pinatas that took forever to move around by hand, the fact I was able to actually steal or collect cargo from a ship I just destroyed felt amazing, because prior to that, it was just gone. It just went with the ship. And even if you were able to board the ship and steal the entirety of the vessel, you couldn't sell from it if that cargo was attached specifically to that pilot, unless you were able to perform the weird action of forcing that ship onto the cargo grid of another ship, which was inconsistent and often just didn't work anyway. But the fact that we had physicalized cargo that we could scoop up felt amazing, and it felt like a step in the right direction, even though, like I mentioned, it was a lot of trouble to collect. Then we saw the addition of larger than one SCU boxes in cargo, and it made that process even easier. So I guess while I'm willing to suffer through the addition of necessary game mechanics, I hope we see a much quicker process on quality of life updates on these new mechanics than we've seen in the past. If we don't, then I'm afraid the game's going to get very grindy very quickly as they continue to roll out new mechanics that affect our ability to just fly our ships. But thanks for taking the time to join me today. If you didn't like the content, hey, thanks for staying this long. And if you did like the content, well, consider leaving a like or comment, or maybe consider tossing me a sub if you're feeling generous. But as always, see you in the verse.